A lot of countries today are distancing. They are saying, "Bhai, ये ईरान का problem तुम्हारा problem है. It is not our problem." And the way the world sees it today is not as if United States is doing some huge global favor or something. That is not the way the world sees it today. No longer are people not only external but now even internally. No longer are people willing to buy this. No longer are people willing to accept that Trump is waging this war because of some nuclear threat or some nuclear threat to the world or some terrorism, anti-terrorism drive and all that. All that narrative is not been accepted by the world. Namaskar. Welcome to another episode of Editorial. Is President Donald Trump losing control over his narrative? Are people slowly deserting him? Are we seeing Donald Trump's downfall? These are questions that we will try to answer tonight. Now, if you see recent past, after a long time, one saw a lot of European nations, nations like Germany, nations like United Kingdom, even non-European nations like Australia, nations like Japan refused Donald Trump. They're distancing themselves from the Iran war. When I say they refused Donald Trump, they refused to send their ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So that's the position. A lot of countries today are distancing. They are saying, "Bhai, ये ईरान का problem तुम्हारा problem है. It is not our problem." This is where Donald Trump stands. This is where Donald Trump's narrative about his attack on Iran stands. He has been isolated. And unfortunately, because of that, even United States, the way it stands today, it stands isolated to a large extent. This has become a United States-Israel problem. And the way the world sees it today is not as if United States is doing some huge global favor or something. That is not the way the world sees it today. The world sees it today as a mistimed and possibly a unnecessary attack that United States did on Iran. That's the way the world sees it. The world clearly sees this as America's love for Israel and, like always, America's selfish interest. So the primary narrative of, Donald Trump trying to say that, he is waging a war against the nuclear facility of Iran and he is waging a war against Iran because they are funding terrorists and all that, that narrative has not gone down with the world, with the globe. Globe has not accepted it. This is where it stands. Now let us go to the topic today. See, there's a gentleman called Joseph Kent. Joseph Kent is a hardcore right-wing hardliner as a politician. He also was a Marine. He is a political hardliner. A very staunch supporter of Trump, by the way. Was a very staunch supporter of Trump. And today, as director of National Counterterrorism Center, he resigned. He resigned and he tweeted his resignation. It is not that he did it quietly. He tweeted his resignation. Let me read out his tweet to you. In his tweet, he said that after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as Director of National Counterterrorism Center, effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. And it is clear that we started this war due to the pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Exactly what I said few minutes back. No longer are people not only external but now even internally. No longer are people willing to buy this. No longer are people willing to accept that Trump is waging this war because of some nuclear threat or some nuclear threat to the world or some terrorism, anti-terrorism drive and all that narrative is not been accepted by the world. Acha, I spoke to you about European countries. I now speak to you about a very, very senior member from the Trump administration. I speak to you about him. Now, it is not just these. You have the civil society that is speaking against Trump right now. In America, civil society in America speaking against Trump and saying that this war was unnecessary. Responsible media houses have been livid. And the fact that they are speaking against Trump and they are speaking against the decision that Trump has taken. So overall, to my mind, Trump is losing control of his narrative. Which means that Trump falling from the pedestal of being a decisive leader and a very, very ruthless kind of a leader and person who is going to make America great again, all that seems to be dwindling. In fact, forget about making America great again. America, like I told you earlier on, seems to be getting isolated. There is one more point that I want to get to your notice. Like I said earlier on, you see, America waged war against Iraq. What nuclear weapons or chemical weapons were found? None. America waged war against Vietnam, like I said, in 1975. Finally, most of the wars that America has fought for their selfish reason. It was no protection of the world or no protection of humanity and all that. They were fought for selfish reasons. Of course, it was labeled differently. All these years, Europe and almost the entire globe bought into their narrative. But this time around, with Trump, everybody seems to be distancing. Like I said, be it Europe, that is France, Germany, UK, Australia, Japan, people seem to be distancing themselves. Doesn't that clearly indicate that things are not going the way Trump wanted it to go? And possibly, doesn't that clearly also indicate that this time America got it absolutely wrong? Not just with what they did, but also with the way they spread the narrative. This is the point I wanted to make. Before I end my editorial, let me just make one more point. You see, the decision that Trump took, at least forget about Europe and forget about external voices. But what we should appreciate about America is there were internal voices. There was dissent from within America. Like I said, civil society. Like I said, media. These are organizations, people with spine talking against their supreme leader, their president. Talking against their president because they felt what the president was doing was wrong. Not just with America, but also with people from other countries. And they had the guts, the will, and the spine to stand against it, to speak against it. I think that's one lesson a lot of us in this world should take. A lot of media in this world should learn from. And a lot of people, so-called civil society, so-called celebrities, so-called bureaucrats, so-called administrative bosses should learn that at times you also talk for the interest of the nation. You also talk for the interest of mankind. Not just for your position, your celebrity status, your administrative status, your chair. You need to go beyond that. I think this is also a lesson. And I think kudos to a lot of people in America who are doing that. Let me end my editorial with a very famous quote from John Lewis. John Lewis was a world-recognized, world-famous civil rights activist. And John Lewis had said that democracy is not a state. Democracy is an act. Kudos to all those people who have a lot to lose, but yet decided to act for their democracy. Kudos to them. Till I see you next time, and that's tomorrow at 10. Namaskar.